An NFL superstar just walked out of a courtroom completely untouched, and the woman who tried to take him down? She just got caught dodging the one question that exposed the whole game. Stefon Diggs didn't just beat the case, he obliterated it, and now a seven-figure number is haunting his accuser everywhere she goes. And Mila Adams really thought she could pull this move in front of America and walk away clean? Brew picked the worst possible courtroom to gamble in. Before we get into it, subscribe, don't miss it. Stefon Diggs, Diggsy himself, the former New England Patriots wideout, was found not guilty on both charges of assault and battery and felony strangulation tied to his former live-in personal chef Jamila Mila Adams. The verdict dropped May 5th, 2026, inside a Dedham, Massachusetts courtroom after a two-day trial, with jurors deliberating for only a few hours before clearing him completely. Mila really thought she had the receipts on this one. She didn't. Now let's open the vault and look at why this case fell apart faster than a folding chair at a cookout in August. Let's start with the woman of the hour, Jamila Mila Adams. On day one of trial, May 4th, 2026, Mila took the stand and told the jury that Diggs entered her bedroom inside his Dedham home and, in her exact words, smacked me with an open hand before allegedly choking her. When I heard that on the testimony stream, I'm not gonna lie, that's a heavy claim. Strangulation isn't a charge prosecutors throw around for fun. That's a charge that follows a man into every contract negotiation he ever has again. Now here's where it gets wild. The alleged incident? December 2nd, 2025. The police report? Almost 2 weeks later. According to the reporting, she waited almost 2 weeks to report it to the police and didn't take any photos after the alleged assault, so there's no physical evidence. When I read that I had to do a double take. No photos? No timely report? Nah, you can't bring strangulation charges to a jury with that kind of paper trail and expect them to nod along. Then comes the moment that broke this case wide open. During cross-examination on May 5th, 2026, defense attorney Brian Silver pressed Mila directly on whether her own attorney had demanded $5.5 million from Diggs 3 weeks before trial. Her response? She refused to answer the question. Yahoo Sports reported it cleanly. Jamila Adams refused to answer a question about whether her lawyer demanded $5.5 million from Diggs. Bro said what? You can't dodge a number like that on the stand and expect 12 strangers to take your side. And then, she pivoted. Instead of answering the $5.5 million question, Mila pivoted and dropped a brand new bomb in front of the jury. She said, and I quote loosely from the ABC reporting, Diggs had offered her $100,000 to recant her statement to the police, a remark that was immediately struck from the record by the judge. When I heard that, I was like, nah, this is theater. That's a move of someone who's desperate. You don't throw out a $100,000 recant claim out of nowhere unless your own number on the table is about to sink you. Now flip to the defense's side. Defense attorney Andrew Kettlewell stood in front of that jury during closing and said the prosecution had not presented a single shred of credible evidence that any assault actually occurred. That line right there, that's where the prosecution lost the plot. No medical records. Number 911 call from that day. No photos. No witnesses who saw injuries. Stefon's own camp wasn't quiet either. His attorneys argued from day one that the alleged assault never happened and framed the entire dispute as one about money, not violence. And then Yanelle Sales, Diggs' chief of staff, took the stand and testified she saw Mila after the alleged incident with no visible injuries. None. Now that we got the quotes, let's connect the dots. That demand letter? Sent 3 weeks before trial. 3 weeks. Read that timing back to yourself. Mila's legal team didn't drop that $5.5 million number on day one of the dispute. They didn't drop it the week after the alleged December 2nd incident. They dropped it 3 weeks before 12 strangers were about to start judging her credibility. That's not a settlement. Brew, that's a hostage negotiation. That report? Filed almost 2 weeks after the alleged incident. Now stack that against the $5.5 million demand letter, and the timeline starts looking like a business plan, not a crime report. Any smart advisor would have told Mila to file immediately, document immediately, photograph immediately. Her camp didn't do any of that. That's a move of somebody planning for civil court, not criminal court. Now here's the part the front page coverage isn't dragging into the spotlight. That third name, Christopher Blake Griffith. The influencer who, back in 2023, accused Stefon of drugging and sexually assaulting him, leading to a back-and-forth where Stefon hit him with a defamation lawsuit and Griffith fired back with a countersuit alleging sexual battery, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And get this, Griffith literally accused Diggs in court filings of conspiring to have him killed to suppress his story. That's the energy floating around Diggs before Mila ever walked into a precinct. Two accusers. Different stories. Same target. And the second accusation conveniently lined up with Griffith's ongoing motion for Diggs' financial records, filed in April 2026, just weeks before Mila's criminal trial started. So Diggs' camp is fighting on two fronts at the same exact moment, and one of those fronts is asking for his bank statements. Coordinated? I can't tell you that. Suspicious timing? You decide. So Mila's lawyers really thought nobody would connect the dots between a $5.5 million pretrial demand and a sympathy testimony? That's terrible strategy. Brew. Any decent advisor would have told her to bury that number in a sealed envelope and never let it see daylight. Instead, it became Exhibit A. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Let's zoom in. Forget the big picture for a second. Let me show you the small stuff. Because in cases like this, the small stuff is where the case is actually decided. Now check this out. Nobody's talking about the word choice in the demand. $5.5 million. Not 5. Not 6. 5.5. That decimal is doing work. A round number says we panicked and picked a vibe. A decimal number with a .5 hanging off the end? That says somebody sat in an office with a calculator and ran the math on Diggs' contract, his endorsements, his Tag Heuer money, his Beats deal, all of it. That decimal point is a fingerprint of strategy. And Mila really didn't catch that the jury would see it that way? That's embarrassing strategic blindness. Now zoom into the $100,000 recant comment. The judge struck it from the record. But here's what's wild. The jury heard it. You can't unring a bell, but you can ring a bell that backfires. Think about it from a juror's brain. A witness who just refused to answer a $5.5 million question turns around and accuses a defendant of a $100,000 bribery offer. That juxtaposition is devastating. It reads like a numbers game, not a trauma account. Mila thought it sounded like proof of consciousness of guilt on Diggs' side. Instead, it sounded like a counterbid in an ongoing negotiation. If she had half a strategic ear, she would have noticed how that landed before her mouth opened. Now the forensic gold, the gap between the alleged December 2nd incident and the police report 2 weeks later. 2 weeks is not a memory issue. 2 weeks is a deliberation window. 2 weeks is, I went home, I called somebody gave me advice, I made a decision. That timeline screamed consultation, not crisis. Survivors who run to police same day or next day get one kind of treatment from juries. Witnesses who file 2 weeks later after consulting attorneys get a completely different kind. And Mila's camp really thought the jury wouldn't smell that distinction? Nah, that's a problem with her team. They didn't read the room. And one more layer, Yanel Sale's testimony about NO visible injuries. Strangulation cases live or die on physical evidence. Pateki in the eyes, finger marks on the neck, bruising on the throat. A trained chief of staff who interacted with Mila in the immediate aftermath saw nothing? That's not a small detail. That's a skeleton key detail. And if Mila's team had half a brain, they would have prepped a counter-witness or medical expert. They didn't. Now let's see how the media covered this. Here's where it gets interesting. Outlets frame this case in completely different lanes depending on their audience. USA Today framed it as a credibility collapse story, leading with Mila's bedroom testimony but circling back to the credibility cracks that opened during cross. Their framing treated the verdict as a logical outcome of an evidentiary thin case. Standard Sports News posture, neutral on tone, heavy on facts. But NBC Boston framed it as a money dispute disguised as criminal complaint, leaning into the defense's argument that the dispute was about money or relationship issues rather than violence. Their angle pulled the curtain back on the civil court motivations that the criminal jury never officially ruled on. Then you got CBS Boston going in even harder. They zeroed in on Kettlewell's not a single shred of credible evidence line and made that the headline thesis. Their framing essentially endorsed the defense's read of the case, which is rare for a local network covering a high-profile NFL trial. Sports Yahoo went a different direction entirely. The headline led with a dodge. Ex-chef avoids question about alleged $5.5 million. That framing puts a credibility issue at the center of the story before you even click. That's editorial choice, and it tells you which way the wider sports media wind is blowing on this one. Now some people in the comments are saying Mila is being railroaded by a system that protects athletes. They are pointing at a lack of jury diversity, the famous defendant tax in reverse, the way wealthy defendants can outspend prosecutors on expert witnesses and private investigators. Some of those critiques are fair in the abstract, but remember the timeline we walked through earlier? The 2-week reporting gap? That's not a system bias issue. That's a documentation issue that any prosecutor in any jurisdiction would struggle with. The receipts don't lie. Mila supporters are reaching trying to defend the dodge. You can be a survivor and have a credibility problem on the stand. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. But trying to spin a refusal to answer a yes or no question about $5.5 million as trauma response is a stretch even for the most generous reading. The media that's trying to angle this for her is fighting a paper trail it can't beat. But here's what nobody is saying. The mainstream narrative wants you to pick a team. Team Diggs or Team Mila. Athlete or chef. Defendant or accuser. Pick one. Vote in the poll. Comment below. Fight your neighbor in the replies. Here's what they won't tell you. Here's the real story. The real victim of this verdict isn't Stefon Diggs. He walks out a free man with a clean criminal record and an NFL career still standing. Ian Rappaport himself broke down what's next for his football future on ESPN. And the real victim isn't Mila Adams either. She still has a civil pathway if she wants one. She still has supporters. She even posted a dancing video days after the acquittal. That ain't the move of a woman who lost her whole life. Read that twice. She's posting dance videos. That's the angle nobody on this app has the spine to point at. Here's my forbidden take. This case is a textbook example of what I call the celebrity litigation industrial complex. It's not a justice system anymore in cases like this. It's a content economy. Mila's $5.5 million demand wasn't pulled out of thin air. Somebody, some lawyer, some advisor, some firm with a track record of running this exact play against athletes, looked at Diggs' financial profile and ran the famous defendant math. The same math that's been run on dozens of NFL players, NBA players, music executives, and tech CEOs over the last decade. The number changes, but the playbook is identical. Demand, threaten, file, settle, disappear. And Mila is a puppet in a strategy that wasn't designed by her. And the industry needs this playbook to keep working because every settlement under seal feeds a machine. Lawyers get paid. PR firms get paid. Cable news fills 24 hours of programming. Reddit gets a mega thread. YouTube creators like me get content. Everybody eats. Except the actual victim, who isn't anybody on the cast list of this case. The real victim is the woman watching this verdict from her couch right now. The hostess at a restaurant whose manager has been creeping on her for 6 months. The assistant at a corporate office whose boss touched her shoulder one too many times. The chef at some other athlete's mansion who's been told to let it slide. Every single one of those women is watching the Mila Adams dodge on loop right now and quietly deciding never to come forward. Because she just watched a public accuser get dragged in front of America over a number her lawyer asked for. That's a lesson she's filing away. And Mila's lawyers? They represent the OLD guard that the culture is done with. The shake the famous defendant and pray he settles strategy is a 1990s playbook in a 2026 media environment where every line item gets leaked to the New York Post within 48 hours. Mila's team is playing checkers while Diggs' team, and the broader culture watching this, is playing chess. Every move her camp made was predictable. 3 weeks pretrial demand? Predictable. Dodging the question on the stand? Predictable. The struck from record $100,000 recant claim? Predictable. And the jury saw all of it for what it was. Then there's a Griffith layer, the part nobody is putting on a thumbnail. Christopher Blake Griffith is a real accuser with real claims pending in real court. And here's what nobody is acknowledging. If Griffith's claims of any merit at all, then Mila's collapse on the stand just made his case 10x harder. Because now Diggs' defense team has a template. They've already proven they can blow up a credibility case in front of a jury. Any future accuser walks into that courtroom carrying Mila's L on their back. Whether they deserve to or not, that's a truth they won't tell you. The collateral damage in this case isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in silence. Every woman who didn't come forward this week because of how Mila got cooked. Every accuser whose claims now look automatically suspicious because the public ran the pattern recognition on Mila and decided she was after the money. That's not justice. That's a cultural side effect. And nobody is invoicing the culture for it. So what happens next? Here's what's most likely to happen in the next 30 to 90 days. A civil suit is gonna get filed. Mila's camp is gonna pivot from criminal court to civil court, where the burden of proof drops from beyond a reasonable doubt to preponderance of the evidence, a much lower bar. Mark my words, that filing is coming. The $5.5 million number wasn't picked out of a hat. It's gonna get refloated in a civil complaint with new framing. But here's the catch. When that civil suit drops, Mila is gonna look desperate. The public already saw the dodge. The public already saw the dance videos. The public already saw the struck from record recant comment. So even if a civil jury sided with her on the lower burden of proof, the court of public opinion is already closed on this case. She's gonna win a piece of paper and lose the narrative permanently. That's not a victory. That's a participation trophy in a war she already lost. Meanwhile, Diggs is gonna do exactly what NFL teams want him to do. He's gonna lay low, let his agent handle the statements, and let the NFL season be his rehab tour. Watch him sign a clean contract somewhere in the spring. Watch him post a comeback clip on Instagram with a caption full of gratitude and zero references to the case. That's a playbook for exonerated stars, and it works every single time. Now, if Mila goes the other direction, if she actually sits down for a real on-camera interview with somebody like Gayle King or a 60 Minutes type, that could shift the public narrative. A long-form interview where she explains the dodge, explains a $100,000 recant claim, explains a $5.5 million number in her words. That's the only move she has left that could change anything. But honestly, I don't think she takes it. Because the second she sits in that chair, every word becomes ammunition in the upcoming civil suit. Her lawyers won't let her near a microphone if there's any chance of a civil case being prepped. So that door is probably closed before it ever opened. If by some miracle she does do that interview, Diggs' camp is gonna get destroyed in the short term, for about 2 weeks. Then the public is gonna pull the trial transcripts, replay the dodge, and the cycle starts over. You can't outrun a courtroom moment with a sit-down interview. We saw what happened to other accusers who tried that route. Mila isn't built for that fight on camera. Looking at the bigger picture, this verdict is going to become a case study in DA offices across the country for the next 10 years. Prosecutors are going to pull this transcript and use it to train new attorneys on what not to do when an accuser has a pre-trial demand letter floating in the discovery pile. The Stefon Diggs trial is going to show up in continuing legal education seminars before the end of next year. Bet money on that. For the NFL specifically, this verdict is going to reshape how teams handle or field allegations during contract negotiations. Front offices are going to start treating criminal cases with civil demand letters attached as different animal from cases without them. Diggs' acquittal just gave every NFL legal department a new playbook chapter. Mila's lawyers didn't just lose a case, they gave the entire league a defense template. And the Griffith case? Watch it closely. Because if Christopher Blake Griffith's motion for Diggs' financial records gets denied in the wake of this verdict, that's a huge signal that the legal climate has shifted in Diggs' favor across the board. 5 years from now, people will look back at this week, the Mila verdict combined with whatever happens in the Griffith case, as the moment Diggs' camp built an impenetrable legal wall around his finances and his reputation. Mila's relevance to that wall? She becomes a footnote. A cautionary tale lawyers tell new clients about when not to send a demand letter 3 weeks before trial. Whatever happens, one thing's clear. Mila Adams already lost. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss when we expose what everyone else is too scared to say. Ring that bell for notifications. And if you want more truth bombs like this, click on one of these videos next. Trust me, you'll want to see what we found.